Welcome, welcome. As you can see, it is Christmas time, at least coming up to it. So it is currently December the 21st. So winter solstice and Yule and the grand conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter for the first time in 800 years. So it feels like a really auspicious day today. So I'm really excited to be doing this talk. And I'm aiming this talk at how we can enjoy the celebration of Christmas and Yule and all of the deliciousness, but without sabotaging ourselves. And, right now, this is 2020, the December the 21st, 2020, and we've had this really intense year. And where we're based, we're just hot off the news of having been put in this elevated tier, which means that there's like a lot of restrictions. And so kind of the natural human response to any kind of restriction or feeling quite low about something is we talk ourselves into this belief that we're treating ourselves. And so I'm treating myself, and it becomes about comfort as opposed to consciousness. And there has to be a place where we're able to celebrate and enjoy, but whilst retaining consciousness and keeping ourselves on track to work towards being in our full potential. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Claire Snowden-Darling. I'm the founder of Balanced Wellness and the head of the College of Functional Wellness. And I also blog and am a podcast host. And I do lots of these talks around what I like to call whole health issues. So it's all very well and good being a wellness practitioner or a nutritionist, but actually health for me is like this whole big picture. And that includes consciousness and, includes the microbiome of our soils. It's a whole conversation, not just about whether or not we've eaten enough vegetables, which is an important one. So I wanted to start off with really talking about, why is it important for us to keep on track, I suppose. Now, I kind of want to get off of any sort of suggestions of diets or, being, what's the people talk about, the wheels have come off or I've fallen off the wagon. Like there is no wagon. There is just no wagon. What there is I'm feeling kind of like I'm in a place of some discipline, some ability to be navigating what I'm eating, what I'm drinking, how I'm doing that. And then there are times where it's just this, sod it, I'll eat or drink anything that I want. And sometimes that is conscious because it's great to let loose, because otherwise what's the point of having this human experience and being in this human body? And if we're doing that on too much of a regular basis, and only we know the distinction between enough and too much, but if we're doing that on too much of a regular basis, then it starts to become sabotage, self-sabotaging. And for me, that's always the line. And we know in ourselves when we are self-sabotaging, like we might be putting on weight, we might be feeling a bit toxic, we just might be feeling a bit like can't be bothered, apathetic, not exercising, and we're not living in our full potential. We're not being the best expression of ourselves. So I kind of also at this stage really want to get away from any kind of belief that exercising every day and being incredibly disciplined all the time around our food is healthy, because it's not. And there is no perfect. And in fact, I think that living like that would be, I think personally that there's a lot of things like orthorexia on the increase, which is people who are so obsessed with eating healthily that it's become an eating disorder. And there's definitely a lot of people overtraining in pursuit of some kind of perfection, and those aren't healthy at all. So this is an ancient festival, it goes way back further than the birth of Christ. It goes, it's one of the most ancient sort of traditions in human culture, is something around this equinox. And so it's really important that we mark these times with the rituals of eating and drinking and being merry. However, it's when we take it to excess. And actually, Christmas is a day, or Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day. That's not enough to put anybody, to derail anybody. Like, you'd have to eat and drink a lot to derail yourself in that short space of time. That is, you might put on, a bit of water weight, but if you actually get back onto a sensible plan afterwards, or your usual kind of eating plan, if it's quite disciplined, that's not enough to sabotage yourself. It's when we start, I don't know, 16th, 17th December, going, oh, it's nearly Christmas. I'll have that 3 mince pies, or, well, I've made the mince pies now, so let's start eating them. Or then we start dragging the food on into the 28th, the 29th, and then, oh, well, it's going to be New Year. I'll just wait until it's January. And then all of a sudden, you've got this 2-week period where you've just been eating and drinking everything, and you don't feel that great in yourself, and you don't feel that good going into a new year. And now you're kind of in this place of self-loathing where, oh, I've got to do something about it. And so we're setting ourselves up to fail and to have to work harder. It's just exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. So the number one thing that people are always concerned about, the people that come into my clinic are concerned about, is how do I, they're concerned about weight. So weight for me comes down to a couple of things I'm going to talk you through, but it's not just so much about the weight, it's also about our health. Because if we're going to have a couple of days of eating an exponential amount of sugar and drinking huge amounts of alcohol, we have to think of the hormonal ramification of that, like the amount of insulin we're piling into our body. I found out, I was actually quite surprised. I found out, I don't know, maybe about 6 months ago, so quite recently, that when we consume alcohol, it actually takes 72 hours for our hormones to get back into a place where we are in fat burning, not fat storage. So what that means, if we take away any kind of weight loss, what's what I'm looking for, sort of any kind of weight loss connotation out of it, is we're not metabolizing properly for 72 hours after alcohol. Now, does that mean that anyone wants a life without alcohol? Some people do, but does that mean that we have to live a life without alcohol? No. It just means we go, okay, I know that I'm choosing this, and I need to then be giving my body what it needs for the 72 hours afterwards, so that when I'm able to be back in the metabolizing space, I'm hitting the ground running. But weight is actually really, I think, the end of the chain, which is often around lack of self-love, lack of boundaries, no desire to feel really good about ourselves or be in our optimum wellness, lack of discipline around being, or not knowing the tools to be able to do that. And all of those things are definitely addressable, and there's something I'll talk about later in terms of how we address those, because otherwise we're just constantly, again, setting ourselves up to fail. I'll start a diet tomorrow, oh, it's too hard. I get halfway through the day, oh, it's too hard, it's too hard, it's too hard. Until we come from this place of absolute desire and discipline, we're never going to get there. And this is the same with any kind of health regime that we're starting, exercising or supplementation or just cutting out, processed food. The desire has to be coming from this place of being very absolute self-serving and, this complete desire for making this change, and then learning how to have the discipline. So I am predominantly going to be talking about weight because that is the question that most people ask, but weight for me is a part of a bigger health question, which is, why are we in a place where the body is storing fat? Because it's not always just about diet. There can be hormonal issues there too. So I am going to talk about weight, but for me, it's not just about weight. That's quite a simplistic reductionist argument. But let's talk about it, because that is the main thing. People go, oh, I'm going to have to go on a massive diet in January, and that's just miserable. So let's talk about the 4 reasons that we put on weight. So the first one is a surplus of calories. So it's really easy how to work out your calories. There is a little equation, you can find it online, and it's to do with your height and weight, and it's to do with how much exercise you do in a day. And there is a certain amount of calories, somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000 calories, depending on male or female and how much you weigh, that the human body needs to be able to get through the day. Now that is, we can't lose weight if we're not eating enough food. It's a metabolic process. So when people come to me and they're not eating enough, I'm like, well, you're not going to lose weight because your body's actually going to be storing it because it's gone into panic mode, which is, really important to know. But a surplus of calories, so too many, is definitely a reason we put on weight. So when I say, if you're generally quite happy with your diet and you're good at maintenance, those couple of days aren't going to make a radical difference. It's when we are in this place of, it's actual, I would call it self-abuse, of just eating just every day, just stuffing our faces. And usually it's with stuff that we don't even feel that good about. It's the big tin of Quality Street, or, we think we want to do it because it's Christmas. I'm going to come on to that as well. So second reason that we put on weight is because we are eating too many carbohydrates specifically. So when we eat carbohydrates, our blood sugars rise. And in response to these blood sugars rising, our body produces the hormone insulin. And insulin reduces this spike in our blood sugar. But whilst it brings down our blood sugar, its other job when it's produced is fat storage. And so that's the takeaway here, is that insulin production equals fat storage. That's not what we want if we want to be in this healthy metabolic state where we're fat burning and full of energy. So as such, we want to make sure that we don't constantly produce insulin. And so one of the ways to do that is to not eat carbs on their own. And again, I'm going to go into that a little bit more shortly. So the third reason, and this is quite surprising, is that we put on weight when we eat food we are intolerant to. So when we eat food we're intolerant to, our body has to mobilize our immune system. So it's literally having an immune response to this food that it's intolerant to. And we produce stress hormones. The stress hormone we produce is cortisol. And when we're producing stress hormones, we're not, so our body goes, oh no, we're in crisis. Cortisol's being produced. So there must be a group of saber-toothed tigers behind me to run away from. So if the body is producing all this cortisol because it thinks there's a bunch of saber-toothed tigers behind us, it's not producing our digestive enzymes to break down our food and to digest it properly. And so therefore, again, we enter a fat storage phase because the body goes, well, quick, store it as fat and I'll work out what to do with it later. So it's very important to reduce our exposures to food that we're intolerant to as often as possible to produce an effective metabolism. So I'm talking about weight here, but when we talk about metabolism, we're also talking about energy production. So how many people talk about being tired all the time? How many people talk about being cold, not warm enough, or too hot, like I can't temperature regulate? These are all signs of metabolism that's not working properly. Going to the loo too much for a wee, not weeing enough, being a bit constipated, all signs of a very slowed down metabolism. So the fourth reason that we put on weight is excessively consuming alcohol, or consuming alcohol, drip feeding ourselves on a daily basis. And so, as I said, because this 72-hour response, it takes 72 hours for the body to get through that spike in the sugar, because that's what alcohol is, before it can get back to fat burning. That's incredible, isn't it? So 4 reasons why we actually put on weight, and therefore we can work out what to do about it. So obviously, going back to number 1, the surplus calories, we are going to be eating more calories at Christmas. Pretty much by definition, that's what Christmas celebration is. And it's also probably the one we don't want to change, because there's something really comforting in it, isn't there? The just pigging out at Christmas is like, it's just a bit joyful. You think about the Christmas dinner and all the trimmings, and lovely. It's just comforting. Why do we have to change that? However, we can choose when we do that. So, the 3 days of Christmas, for example, it's about not carrying it on through that week, and actually maybe getting back onto a more sensible eating plan for that week. And what's great this year is none of us can really socialize. So it's actually going to be quite a lot easier if we choose, if we have the desire it's going to be easier to actually get ourselves back on track. So I actually had a weekend, went out for dinner on Friday before lockdown happened again here, and I had a really great time, and it had been planned, and I had some alcohol, and then on Saturday we were doing some stuff to get ready for Christmas, and I had some mulled wine. So I planned for that weekend, and then it would have been the easiest thing in the world today to go, oh wow, solstice, isn't it? Let's crack on, eat more of those mince pies. But actually I'm like, no, I've got, pretty much, most of a week before it's Christmas Eve dinner. So I can be on plan. I can be doing my exercise at home. I can be out when there's a break in the rain, walking my dog. I can be back in my daily sort of lifestyle without it being so disciplined that I'm actually losing out. I can have a lovely weekend of lovely food and then go back to being on plan. So yeah, give yourselves an opportunity between Christmas and New Year to get out, get some fresh air. We don't make any vitamin D at this time of year, but just getting any kind of exposure to the very small amount of daylight we get is really important. So number 2, the eating too many carbohydrates. Again, eating more carbohydrates pretty much defines Christmas. Christmas pudding and mince pies and gingerbread and alcohol and roast potatoes and parsnips. It's all pretty much carbohydrates and fats. The fat's the good thing. We're going to talk about that. So whilst we might be expecting to go into a caloric overload, we can stop ourselves from going into the insulin roller coaster that I was talking about earlier, this constant production of insulin. So I like to think about carbohydrates. An easy analogy is if you think about carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates could be fruit. They could be grains and beans. So your oats, oatcakes, anything bread related, lentils, chickpeas, anything like that. They would be all your sweet treats and alcohol, and they'd also be root veg. So if you think about sort of potatoes or crisps, if you're going to eat any carbohydrates on their own, I want you to think about a helium balloon. So a helium balloon, obviously, if you let go of it, it's going to fly up in the air. That's what's going to happen with your blood sugars if you eat the carbohydrates on their own. Your blood sugars are going to rise exponentially like a helium balloon going up in the air. I call that eating carbs, unsupported carbs. Now, what I mean by unsupported is, think of the helium balloon, we can weight it back down to earth. Yeah, like we can weight it to the table. We can put, a weight on that string and we can support it. We can hold it down. That's exactly what we can do with carbohydrates. Now, the way that we do that is eat your sweet stuff after your main meal. Even if you've had carbohydrates in that main meal, it's still better to eat it having had a main meal. So that's why dessert really should be dessert, and sweets after you've eaten something proper. That, is how it used to be. But secondly, actually offset your carbs. So the weight to hold down that helium balloon nutritionally is actually, we can use protein and we can use fat. So ideally protein and fat, which is why carbs with a meal is great. But if you can only use one, then I would say definitely go for fats. So our fats would be nuts, cheese, avocados, olives, seeds, creams, those kind of things, butters. So if you're having a little bit of a sort of splurge on the booze, nibble on some olives with it, have some cheese with it, have some nuts with it. If you're going to have that mince pie, then stick the double cream on the top. Like, obviously, if you're dairy intolerant, I'll be using alternatives, but like go for the problem was back in the 80s, everyone started saying that fat was bad. And so we made everything low fat, which actually caused more diabetes and more obesity because everyone was then eating unsupported carbs. And that's what actually causes the problem. So it was back in the old day, you'd go to your nan's house and she'd say, oh, do you want some tin peaches and cream? And these days we go, oh no, hold the cream. I'll just have the tin peaches. It's where we're going wrong. They had bread and dripping, and there was cheese and wine parties. We got it wrong. So we need to support our carbs. And yes, that means that particularly over those, bits of those festive days, If you're munching on some nuts or some olives or some cheese whilst you're drinking your wine and your port and your amaretto and your Baileys and all those things, yes, your calories are going to go up. However, you're not going to be causing the hormonal imbalances. And so a couple of things are going to happen. Firstly, you're not going to wake up the next day feeling utterly awful. Secondly, it's going to take your body less, not as long to get back on track hormonally, because it's not got this fallout from all of this sort of insulin spiking and dropping and all of this stress hormone going into the body. And so you can bounce back quicker. So it would be water weight, so water retention weight, while your body goes, wow, that was a lot of calories. And then it will actually, get back on track a lot easier. So it's no hardship, is it, if you're having some crisps, to also have a few nuts or some cheese, or, make your own sour cream or creme fraiche full fat dip. I mean, amazing. This doesn't have to be a hardship. It can be, it's actually just super delicious, and it really helps your health. So 3, of course, was the eating food we're intolerant to. Now, this could be a little bit tricky if you haven't thought about it already, but the main protagonists, there are quite a few when it comes to intolerances, but we like to work in quite a sequential way. And the big foundation food intolerances are wheat and milk. Not all gluten, wheat and milk. For some people, it's all gluten, but for most people, it's wheat and milk. So the good news is you can make your own mince pies out of spelt flour. You can buy really great gluten-free breads now, or gluten-free pita breads, or whatever it is you want to make your canapes with. You can really live that kind of lifestyle without it having any kind of knock-on effect to what you're eating. Like, it's really simple. We're making Yorkshire pudding on Christmas Day with some spelt flour. It's really possible. And if you're a full celiac, then obviously you'll know about that, and you'll be making full provisions, and you'll be fully gluten-free. But you can make it so you're not eating food you're intolerant to. And in terms of being dairy-free, I mean, the great thing is it's really easy now to find a huge amount of alternatives. So, you can buy even like dairy-free spray cream, and you can, like, this isn't clean, whole food, like, that we would go on about the rest of the year, but it's Christmas and we all want those treaty things, and we kind of want it, especially on the back of a hard year. So this is about going, okay, I'm going to minimize my exposure to the foods that I'm intolerant to. So the other thing is, I think we made our mince pies out of spelt and almond flour, like, delicious, could not be more delicious. So the 4th one about alcohol, choose when you're going to drink, and then enjoy it and plan for it, and then plan not to for the next couple of days, or for the next day, or at least, have a break in between. And of course, those age-old things of, drink some soda water or some water between drinks, because that will allow you just to spread it out. I'm kind of if I'm going to go out and drink, I'd like to go out and drink, I'll have some water with it, but I just rather not drink the next day. And if you're doing a couple of days, great, just enjoy it, and then plan for that day where you're going to put loads of fresh vegetables into your body and drink loads of water. The big thing here, though, and this is where it comes down to the sabotage, is I want to talk to you about the difference between what your head says and what your body says, because your head will tell you it's Christmas, in it, so just crack on and eat all of it, and I could because it's there, and best not to waste it, best to eat it all up, or all of those stories that your head will tell you. But the real key here is to listen to what your body tells you, because it might have a very different opinion. And like I said, it would have been the easiest thing today to wake up and go, oh well, it's the rundown to Christmas now, may as well crack on and have that mince pie. But the truth is, could have talked myself into it, but when I listen to my body's going, actually, you had a bit of that yesterday, and there's quite a bit of sugar, and I'm feeling a little bit sort of sluggish on the back of that. So my body is actually saying, I'd rather not have it. My head would easily say, oh, it'll be delicious, oh, it's really raining outside, and I can have a cup of tea and that mince pie, it'll be really yummy. But when we listen to our body, we can actually start to make different decisions. And if you notice that your body's actually going, oh, I just really fancy some, water and maybe some soup and something a bit lighter, or, some fresh vegetables and some, chicken or some fish, when you can give your body what it's asked for instead of railroading over it, it will trust you more, and the signals become stronger and stronger and stronger until you don't railroad over them anymore. And if you notice that you're railroading over them, then for me, that's like really, don't beat yourself up about it. This is just really useful information to go, okay, there is something going on with my desire and my discipline, and I need to get to the cause of what's going on here. I need to start drilling down into this. This is just information for my growth and my expansion from a place of radical self-love. And so Christmas is a really interesting time to observe yourself. Can you actually go, okay, I know what I want to do. And again, there is no perfect. You might decide to have an extra day of drinking. And if you do, enjoy it. But how can we just collate this data and make it about information for us to do some work with? So hydrate in between, eat all the vegetables you can in between, and actually really tune into your body, because I think you'd find it quite surprising actually when your body says no and when it says yes. Now, I'm talking as an ex-junk food consumer and sugar addict, and so I know the difference between just railroading over it and eating it because I can and because it feels like a treat, and then starting to go, how I feel afterwards isn't a treat. The treat is actually being able to wake up the next day and go, oh yeah, no, I'm totally excited about eating something different today. So if all that sounds really interesting, and you want to know more, then I would really recommend that you check out our website, balancedwellness.co.uk. And if you're struggling with your health, then I would actually look at our free online symptom assessor, which is on that website, balancedwellness.co.uk, or on iwanttofeelbetter.co.uk, which is a really clever, just if you have symptoms, it actually shows you which of your hormones is unstable and gives you an opportunity to work with them. If it's desire and discipline you struggle with, or that sabotage is something that you do, and you're listening to this and going, yeah, that's great, I'm still going to be troughing and drinking and eating everything that's not nailed down, but I'd really like to change that behavior, then I would really recommend that you look up our Radical Self-Love. So if you go to www.radicalselflove.co.uk, there's 3 talks around radical self-love, eating from a place of self-love, and also an online program that we offer called Reclaim Your Life, which is around how to learn how to not self-sabotage. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and do get in touch and follow us on Instagram, so Balanced Wellness UK, and also on Facebook. And I am Claire Snowden Darling on all of those channels. Thank you so much.